If there is one skill that can change every aspect of your life, it is your ability to learn things quickly. Your success in every aspect of your life, work, relationships, friendships, hobbies, personal growth, is a result of learning and applying that learning quickly. So if you can learn how to learn, you can apply it to any skill, any mindset, any habit, any hobby, and basically upgrade every aspect of your life. And I have experienced this firsthand. When I first started working, I spent a lot of time learning how to learn, and then I applied that to learning how to write, video editing, graphic designing. As a result, I ended up getting so many side projects and gigs that allowed me to make money from them while still holding a full-time job and still having free time. I have applied the skill to this YouTube channel, to my own self-growth journey, and to this day, I use it for whatever I want to learn. Now, the good thing is that anybody can learn it. You can learn it too. And I am going to show you exactly how in very, very simple steps. So whether you are a student or a freelancer, a corporate employee, or a homemaker, I do not want you to miss this video. Because once you understand how to work with your mind, with your brain, instead of against it, you can learn to master anything. Now, for ease of understanding, I have divided this video into 3 parts. The first is your preparation, what you need to do before you start learning a new skill or anything new. Second is your process of learning the actual skill. And third is making that skill a part of your life so you never ever forget it. So go ahead, grab your coffee, get your notebook, and let's learn how to learn 10 times faster. Now, the first step to learning anything faster is understanding how your brain actually works. Learning is not just about taking in information. अगर ऐसा होता तो you would have remembered every single math formula from school. But you don't. That is because learning is about how well your brain is absorbing, organizing, and then applying that information when needed. So brain has a 4-step process to learn anything, right? First is input. This is when your brain receives new information through your senses. So for example, if you're learning Spanish, watching a Spanish video is your input. If you're learning how to drive, looking at road signs, sitting in a car for the first time, that is your input. Understanding where, brake is, pedal is, that is your input. Then comes the processing stage for your brain. This is where your brain will understand the information and link it to what it already knows. So when, let's say, you learn the word gracias in Spanish, which means thank you in English. Now you can corroborate it, like your brain knows that this is correlated to thank you in English, and that is how it remembers that gracias means thank you. Similarly, when you press the brake on your car and it stops, that is when your brain understands, okay, this means stop. The third stage after this is retention, where your brain decides whether this information is important for the long term or not. So for example, if you just learn 2 words in Spanish, hola, gracias, and then you never use them again, your brain will consider them not important, and over time you will forget them. Similarly, if you learn driving from an instructor once and then you never drive a car again for 2 years, you will have to relearn it because your brain considered it not important. It doesn't remember how to drive anymore. So to retain that information, you have to do it repeatedly. And the fourth is, of course, application. This is where you use what you have learned. So if you learn Spanish for a month and then go to Spain and actually use those words, you've applied them and then they've become a part of your core memory. Similarly, if you start driving and you drive every single day, it will start to feel automatic. It will become muscle memory. And this process of basically going from input to application is how you have learned everything in life, from brushing your teeth to riding your bike. Every new skill follows this pattern. So if you want to learn faster, you need to make things simple for your brain at every single step. You need to actively learn and use a skill in the real world enough times to make it automatic. But before you start to learn, you also need to understand the difference between learning cognitive skills and physical skills. While all skills follow the same basic neural pattern, how you learn something will differ based on what skill you're learning and how your brain processes information fundamentally, how you individually process information. For example, one girl might be very easily able to learn complex choreography, dance very well, but at the same time, she might struggle a lot when it comes to learning a language. Similarly, someone might pick up mathematics very, very easily, but then they will struggle with physical coordination in sports. My brother, for example, is great at sports. He can pick up the basics in a week, become better than the average person in just 2 months. I, on the other hand, am better at analytical problem-solving things. So if I have to learn a new mental model, it will not take very long for me. But if I have to learn a new sport, that is going to take longer. And this happens because I am an analytical and memory dominant individual who is naturally better at cognitive skills. But my brother is a motor dominant individual who is naturally better at coordinated physical activity. This is why if you ever struggle to learn something, there's nothing wrong with you. You just need to understand how to align it with your natural learning patterns. And you do this by borrowing brain power. Your brain has limited resources, like limited cognitive resources. It's like a phone battery. The more you use it, the more it gets drained. It can handle only so much information. So every time you learn something new, your brain uses energy to process that information, to store it, to recall that information. And if you overload it with too many things at once, learning will become difficult. It will become slow. So to learn faster, you need to free up your mental bandwidth. This means you need to reduce the number of decisions you make in a day so that you can actually use that stored brain power to learn something. So simple changes like planning your day in advance, automating small decisions, even eating the same breakfast every morning, doing these things that you do on autopilot preserve your brain power that you can then apply in learning the new skill that you want to learn. This is exactly what people like Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, they do. They wear the same outfit every single day. They don't waste energy on this decision making. Let's understand how you'll apply it, right? If you're a student, for example, this will mean being strategic about how and when you study. If you have spent your day scrolling on social media and then you're worrying about your assignments and then you just keep jumping from one task to the other, by the time that you sit down to study, your brain is already very, very overwhelmed. But if you simplify your schedule, you plan in advance that you will have a social media time, you plan your non-study related tasks in advance, and you limit your distractions when you actually sit down to study, you will have a lot more mental capacity to use for studying and retaining that information. Basically, when you manage your cognitive load, you are able to create space for learning, for deep focus, for mastering that skill properly. You're basically doing smart work over hard work. Now, one other way of working smarter is to actually gather all the resources that you need to learn something new beforehand, before you actually sit down to learn that thing, right? Without this, you will keep running around in circles, you will waste time trying to find resources when it's actually time to learn, and you might get sidetracked because you end up consuming a lot of unnecessary information. This causes something called theory overload, where people, they spend too much time collecting information or consuming information, like you are probably doing right now. This might be the third, fourth, fifth video you've watched on how to learn faster. Have you really gone ahead and applied any skill from any of those videos in real life to see if it works? And you have your answer. When you collect so much information without actually using it, your brain gets overwhelmed. It gets flooded with information that it eventually forgets because you are not applying it. So if you are learning a language, for instance, or if you just want to learn how to learn, instead of just consuming random YouTube videos, either watch one video and apply what you learned in that video, or find a course or a guided playlist that takes you from start to finish in one go. You can join a Spanish-speaking group on Reddit or Discord to practice your skill and download movies in the language to watch and understand. And all of this you do before you start learning that skill. Similarly, if you're learning coding, you will not just read random articles, right? Find real projects, find real exercises, find a course that you can follow. And when you do this, you stop wasting time searching for material, you stop wasting time trying to figure out how to learn, and you just get down to learning. And the final thing you need to do as a part of your prep for learning is to mentally prepare yourself for the journey before you start. When you begin learning something, there will be a lot of times when you are uncomfortable. So let's say that you want to start learning how to code, right? You're going to sit down, you are going to get absolutely confused by everything that you see on the internet, right? You will see, oh my God, this is not making sense. And that discomfort will make you want to give up. But that is when you have to remember that it gets worse before it gets better. And that what you are seeking is just at the tip of all of this hard work. The easiest way to do this is to write this line that it gets worse before it gets better. Pin it somewhere that you can see it every single day. It could be your bulletin board, your phone wallpaper, lock screen, whatever. Place it where you can see it. And secondly, practice affirmations that help you align your identity with somebody who has already mastered that skill. So if you want to become a great chess player, instead of thinking of yourself as somebody who's trying to learn chess, you refer to yourself as a chess player. And when you do this, you start making decisions like a chess player as opposed to somebody who's just trying to learn it. So a skilled chess player would not avoid analyzing their losses just because it's frustrating. They would not stop practicing openings and strategies after a tough match. When you align your identity with who you want to become, it causes a mental shift in your brain that helps you push through the tough parts, because here you're no longer learning that skill. You are becoming that person. The first thing you need to do is learn by doing. Your brain learns best when you follow a simple cycle, which is learn a little, try it, fail, adjust, repeat the successful try, and then make it permanent. And every single skill follows this same cycle multiple times over. Now this pathway works because of the neural connections in your brain. They get stronger every time you do something, every time you use those neural connections. So when you learn something new, your brain will build a weak connection, right? It becomes a part of your short-term memory. But if you keep applying that learning repeatedly, that connection gets stronger and stronger, it gets faster until a point that skill becomes automatic. So you have to repeat it enough times for it to become automatic. For example, initially when you start to drive, it is so difficult, right? You have to figure out every time, you have to see where you're placing your foot and whether your mirrors are correct, and oh my God, it's just too many things happening at once, too much sensory overload. But if you keep doing it every single day, within just a month, you get so comfortable that you can even eat a sandwich while you're driving. You are multitasking like a pro and you have no qualms doing it. I'm not telling you to eat while you drive or text while you drive. Don't do that. It's not advisable. But I'm just saying that you get the ability to, because it becomes second nature. In addition to that, when you make mistakes, your brain actually learns better because it figures out what not to do. So let's say that you start learning driving, and then when you're driving, on the co-passenger side, you hit somebody on the elbow with the mirror, right? Happens to a lot of people. The next time when you get out in your car to drive, you'll be a lot more careful about the gap on that side of the car than you were before. And that will prevent you from hitting other people while you're driving. So each failure basically acts as a signal. It helps you adjust, improve, and then strengthen those neural pathways so that habit becomes automatic. And this also stands true for cognitive skills, by the way. So if you're trying to become a detached person, for instance, you can read as many books as you want on emotional intelligence or mindfulness, but you're not going to really learn how to stay detached until you practice it in real life situations. So let's say you've learned something from the book, and the next time you go to a family gathering, some relative criticizes you, you are probably going to react emotionally, right? This is your first instance of doing this after you've learned new information. But after that, if you step back, if you analyze your reaction, if you remind yourself to do better next time, the next time this happens, your brain will have rewired a little bit and it will probably not react as aggressively. You might even stay quiet. And each time you practice doing this, whether it's pausing before reacting or letting go of something that's outside of your control, you build stronger neural pathways that make staying calm feel a lot more natural. So what I'm trying to say with this point, when I say learn by doing, is whatever you learn in theory, and there is a lot of theory for every skill that you want to learn, you have to balance it out with practice. So you start by learning just enough theory to get started, and then you try it immediately. When you try it, you're going to fail. So then you make adjustments accordingly, and then you repeat that input that gives you the best output until it sticks. But you might be like, but Aditi, how do I know if I'm doing or repeating something correctly. This is where we talk about feedback. We already know that you're going to make mistakes when you are learning. But in order to learn the right thing, you need to know how to correct that mistake before making an adjustment. So think about learning basketball, right? You take a shot and you miss. Or think about learning boxing. You box and your punch just doesn't land on the boxing bag. But if nobody is there to tell you what went wrong, you are going to keep making the same mistake. But if a coach or somebody who's an advanced player points out that, you need your stance to be like this, or you need to have your elbows tucked in when you are making the basket, then you can fix it immediately. And then with enough instant corrections, your brain locks in the right movement. Soon, shooting becomes effortless and you are able to do it a lot better. Similarly, if you're writing an article, but the feedback does not come for a month, you are not really going to learn how to improve your article. So essentially, if you want to learn something effectively and quickly, your feedback that you get needs to be tied directly into the learning process so that you're not waiting days or weeks or months to know if you're actually improving. So one way to do this by yourself is to track your progress. If you're learning public speaking, for instance, record yourself while you are, speaking in public, watch it back, spot areas for improvement. When I first started writing, when I first started editing videos, I used to go back and watch my own videos, read my own articles, and I would always find mistakes. But an even better approach was when I went back, read better articles, watched better edits on social media, and found that mine were choppy, I had bad audio, or maybe my sentence structure was off. That pushed me to learn how to fix these mistakes before moving on, before writing the next article or before editing the next video. Self-reviewing my work and work of better creators basically allowed me to create an instant feedback loop. And that was really helpful. Another method is to get external feedback. So this is one of the easiest ways to do it, right? Which is why people hire coaches, they work with trainers, they will work with mentors, or somebody who's just a few steps ahead of them who can give them corrections right away. This is what I did when I started weight training. My coach could always correct my form in real time. So over the course of 1 year, I learned how to lift and do all of these compound movements with perfect form. If you're learning a language, you can do this by practicing with native speakers instead of just studying in isolation. And you can also use technology to automate a lot of the feedback, right? AI tools like Grammarly are great for helping you write better. ChatGPT can help you build on critical arguments, improve your speech if you've written it. All of this stuff can be automated using AI. It's very, very helpful, honestly. My brother, he watches slow motion sports clips to improve his form whenever he's learning a new sport. Creating such feedback loops is so important to learning any skill, because if you're not receiving feedback, you are never going to know what to correct yourself on. But if you do, they will help make feedback unavoidable. This way, your brain is always strengthening the correct neural pathway as opposed to just repeating something mistakenly over and over again. This brings me to tip number 3, which is to find opportunities for immersion. We know that you need to practice a skill to really learn it. But if you are not in an environment where you are actually using that skill, you're not going to be motivated enough to continue on with it. There's this book called Fluent in 3 Months by an author called Benny Lewis, where he talks about how in school he learned how to learn languages in 3 months or less by immersing himself within the world of that language. So every time he has to learn a new language, he surrounds himself with native speakers, he changes his phone language, and he avoids speaking in English at all costs. And this results in him picking up the language very, very quickly. And immersion is actually helpful for whatever skill you want to learn. Think about how we learn lyrics to songs, right? Without even trying. We don't sit down and study those lyrics, honestly, right? We hear a song repeatedly, and before we know it, we're singing along and we've learned the lyrics. That is immersion in action. When something is all around you, your brain just can't avoid it. It will pick it up effortlessly. So when I was first learning how to do makeup, I was surrounded by everything makeup. Okay, makeup products. I used to step out wearing makeup. I used to find opportunities where I had to wear makeup. I used to watch videos on makeup. I even started filming myself to see how I looked. It became a part of my environment. My brother, whenever he's learning a new sport like boxing, tennis, he's not just watching videos on it or just going for a 1-hour session and doing it. He gets the equipment, he practices the movements constantly. So he'll just walk around, doing punches. He'll have a punching bag at home. He analyzes professionals in the space. He trains with a coach. He does everything for him to be a part of that environment. It's automatic for him. And that makes learning unavoidable. But like I mentioned earlier, it takes cognitive resources to immerse yourself in a skill, right? You can't do it if you don't have the time, which is why it's only really possible to do it for one skill at a time. If you're trying to learn multiple things all at once, it's not going to work. Your learning is going to become slower. So if your aim is to learn things faster or learn a particular skill faster, you need to immerse yourself in it. Now, the next step is the concept of thinking from first principles, which basically means that you learn faster by breaking a skill down into its core fundamentals rather than just copying what others are doing. Most of us in school are taught the opposite of this. We're told to memorize stuff, we are told to ratta maro, just copy stuff that's already working. But if you've noticed, you quickly forget those things once you've given the exam because you never took the time to fundamentally understand what was going on behind all of that memorization. So Elon Musk is a good example of somebody who follows this principle to the T. When he wanted to build rockets, he did not just copy what NASA was doing, right? He broke down the steps, searched for even the basic questions like what are the raw materials needed for rockets? How do they function together? And by doing that, he found a way to make rockets much cheaper than traditional companies. Similarly, if you're trying to learn something like public speaking, most people are just going to memorize speeches, copy famous speakers, read from books and just, try and do what they're saying. But that's like following a recipe without understanding how the ingredients work. On the other hand, if you just ask yourself what makes a speech powerful and what are the fundamentals of a good speech, you will be able to learn the basic tenets of creating a great speech without feeling the need to rely on other speakers. So whether you're learning a new language, a musical instrument, coding, whatever it is, you have to break it down. You have to ask yourself, what are the fundamental concepts behind this? And once you have your answer, you will not just memorize something, you'll actually learn it for life. Now, one issue that a lot of us will face while we're learning a new skill is that we will start out with a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of gusto. But over time, as things get boring, things get difficult, we will eventually give up. This happens because when you start something new and then you make a little progress in it, your brain releases dopamine in response to that, which makes you want to do it again. But as you keep doing something, that release of dopamine slows down because it becomes more commonplace. And then that skill doesn't seem as exciting anymore. So your motivation to do it goes down and you're like, ab kya fayda? Now, this is when you need to figure out ways to trigger the release of dopamine in your brain by making the learning process more fun. If you want to continue learning a skill and achieve mastery in it, this step is very, very important. Now, one way to do this is to gamify the process, right? Turn the learning milestones into challenges themselves, like how Benny Lewis challenged himself to learn a new language in less than 3 months. Or you can tie it to a physical reward. So you give yourself a prize every time you win a chess match within a stipulated time period. You can also use apps or other tools in the market to gamify the process, like how Duolingo has gamified language learning. And that is very, very helpful as well. You just basically need to sit down, figure out what is a good enough reward for a milestone you achieve in a skill, and then tie them together. And every time you reach that milestone, you get that reward. Now, at this point, you already know how to learn smarter, how to learn faster. But the final phase or the final step of this journey is making sure that your skill becomes permanent, that you don't just learn it and forget it. Because what's the point of doing that if you're going to forget everything later? For this, the first thing you need to do is find opportunities for real-world application. Think about when you learned algebra in school. You spent all of that time doing equations, memorizing formulas like the quadratic equation, Pythagorean theorem. But do you even recall these names right now? Unless you are in actuarial sciences or other math-related fields, you have long forgotten everything. And you have never gone back. Why? Because for most people, those formulas never had any real-world purpose. You learned them to pass a test, not to use them in daily life. But if you really want to make a skill stick permanently, like learning guitar for instance, or a language, you need to find ways to apply and use that skill in the real world. Think about the skills that you learn every day, like budgeting, driving a car, using your smartphone. Nobody has to force you to memorize those things, right? You learned them by yourself because you need them for everyday functioning. So for learned skills, for skills that require a little bit more effort, you need to find such opportunities. So maybe it's playing guitar at friends' parties every time you go for a party, or connecting weekly with people from Spain to converse in Spanish so that you remember that language, or to practice detachment every time somebody tries to rile you up, or speaking up at office events to become a master public speaker. If you learn how to do this, you will never forget the skill because it'll reach a stage of becoming a habit, which is the next thing that you need to do to make a skill permanent. When you start to learn something, it takes up a lot of cognitive load, a lot of brain power. It's always that extra thing that your brain has to do. It has to take time out for. But if you think about your habits, like brushing your teeth, writing, driving daily, these are habits you don't have to spend a lot of mental energy on. And when you don't have to spend mental energy on something, that frees up your mind to do new things. So if you want to learn a skill for the long term, you have to find a way to make it automatic so that it doesn't occupy so much space in your head. The easiest way to do this is to habit stack. Tie it in with your existing habits for long enough that it becomes a habit in itself. A friend of mine who is learning French has actually used Duolingo to do this. He uses Duolingo every single morning while he's drinking his coffee, that's about 30 minutes, and for another 30 minutes on his commute back from work. Within just 1 month, he became pretty conversational in French. And now it is just a part of his routine. The idea behind doing this is simple. You don't have to fight your routine, you have to use it to your advantage. Because when learning something fits effortlessly into your day, it stops to feel like a difficult thing, like a chore. It becomes a natural part of your lifestyle. And finally, tip number 3 of making something permanent is to teach it. You do not really know something well enough until you can teach it in a way that a complete beginner would understand. And I have applied this concept to almost everything in life, even this YouTube channel. I wanted to improve my own mindsets and habits, and in researching for you guys and teaching you guys, these became automatic for me. This is part of a concept called the Feynman technique, where essentially, to understand a point, you start to break things down as if you were teaching it to somebody else. And when you do this, instead of just memorizing things superficially, you understand something fundamentally from first principles. You also realize where you're falling short, and this makes room for improvement. So when you struggle to explain something, you know that this is a gap in your understanding, in your knowledge, which is basically your brain signaling you to go back, relearn that part, and try again. So whatever skill you are trying to learn, pick a kid or pick your parents, and then when you are in the process of learning it, also simultaneously try and teach it to them. Because their learning curve is going to be significantly different from yours. They understand things differently. So when you explain things to them, you will have to do it without fancy language, without jargon, in a way that they can understand. And in doing so, your own understanding of it will become impeccable. Now, many people struggle with learning efficiently because they assume that simply spending more time on a skill leads to faster results. But speed or learning faster actually comes with efficiency, your mental efficiency, which your brain develops through all of these systems that we have discussed today. So just to recap, here is everything on screen if you want to take a screenshot that we have covered in today's video. The combination of these techniques accelerates your learning because it maximizes your brain's efficiency, it maximizes retention, and it maximizes adaptability. So go ahead, drop a comment, let me know what were your top 2 techniques from this list and what you are currently learning. And if you found value in this video, make sure you share it with other people who might need it, and watch this video next because YouTube says that you are going to love it. And I'm going to see you guys very, very soon in the next one.